You're listening to episode 203 of the Marathon Running Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Rome Marathon. Hey runners, and welcome back to episode 203 of the Marathon Running Podcast. My name is Letty.
My name is Ryan. Today we're going to talk about the Rome Marathon though.
Yes, we are. So let's get into that. Let's talk about Rome a little bit and the race, the history of the race, and other race information.
So I tried to look up the history of the Rome Marathon. For the most part, from 1995 on, it seems to have been run at least. So what else?
So the marathon has a record of 2:06:42, which was actually reached this year by Asbel Ruto, which was kind of cool. I wish we could have witnessed him crossing the finish line. 2:06 is pretty fast, but you know, the fact that it was that gives you something to think about, given that the world record and other marathons are run so much faster. And I think part of it is the fact that there's about 6 kilometers of the race being run on cobblestone. The elevation, however, is only about 20 meters, which is about 60 feet here and there. We ran it really slowly, so I don't feel like we could appreciate or not appreciate the hills so much because of the pace that we were going, but I didn't find it very strenuous at all.
Yeah, agreed. I don't really remember many hills, but I know there were some decent hills there.
Definitely at the end. As for sights, the Rome Marathon is super scenic, very, very beautiful. Another reason that the marathon probably doesn't have a super fast time is that the prize money amount is not as high as other races would have it. And also the marathon is taking place in Rome where, you know, it's Mediterranean climate comparable to California with temperatures around 60 degrees, 50, 60 degrees, which is not ideal. You for racing and PRing probably would like a cooler temperature to do that in.
Yeah. I mean, I know the day that we raced, it seemed like it was actually a little bit warm, but it was nice. I think it was a little warmer than predicted, actually.
Yes, absolutely. And we were also not straining, so that helped us. But had we run a little bit harder, we probably would have felt the temperature. I mean, I was running in my sports bra. I was warm enough for that. So, you know, that goes to show something. I don't run every race in a sports bra. So
what brought us to Rome and the Rome Marathon?
So, okay, there's two different sides of the story. My story is my brother wanted to run his first marathon and he has his favorite city being Rome. So he selected Rome as his first marathon site. And I agree because I will never say no to traveling if it's plausible. The other side of the story is my brother said, hey, it's the Rome Marathon. Rome is your favorite city. You should run it. I personally believe me.
So we'll actually hear from your brother later because we'll bring him on. It was his first marathon, so it's kind of a cool perspective. And we can get into that later.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the qualifying time and training that you needed for this race. Rome does not have a qualifying time, and it doesn't seem like they ever really sell out on their race. The race had about 13,000 people. It seemed much larger though. And it was, we signed up. When did we sign up? Probably in February because you didn't know if you would have the time off for this marathon. And it was fairly easy. You navigate the website. If you come from a foreign country, normally for European races, you need a medical waiver. However, Rome has an exception to that. If you are running it for fun, you're not competing in it, then that's waived. And so we just filled that out online. It was very simple with their Google translated sites, and that was that.
Yeah, so we flew to Rome. Flying from the United States to Rome wasn't too difficult. It's not too far.
Well, I felt like it was a little bit tedious because we live in Fort Myers, Florida, and we drove the car over to Miami. And then from Miami, we flew to New York, and from New York, we flew to Rome. I could have done without the drive from Fort Myers to Miami, which is approximately 3 hours.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with us is I had to get the time off, so we had to fly out and get there immediately right before we can pick up our bibs and do all the expo stuff. So if we had a little bit more time, it'd be a little easier. But overall, for an international marathon, I didn't think it was too bad, but yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too bad at all. So then we arrived on Saturday and literally had to rush to the expo. With just a few hours prior to closing, we got to the expo. The expo had a huge line, and we always talk about expos, so we're going to kind of go into that a little bit. We compare expos all over the place. The expo had a line outside.
Usually you like to go on Fridays, right? Before
I like to go Thursdays or Fridays,
Thursdays.
But obviously that wasn't possible since we didn't really leave till Saturday. So it was literally fly, get there, head to the expo, and then stand in line.
It was quite a line.
It was a huge line. The line was divided by bib numbers. There was a lot more men compared to women. So the men's race was divided for the first, 7,000, and the next 7,000. They had huge lines. For women, it was just one kind of shorter line. But obviously I was going with my brother, with you, and my brother's friend. So it was not really possible for me to just go in and get everybody's bib. We had to all wait for each other.
And they might have had more organization than it seemed, but it felt like we were all waiting in lines, and then they would let a chunk of people into the expo, and then you still have to go find the spot to get your bib anyway. But then they'd wait and let more people in, and then wait. I'm sure they were regulating it based on the size of the building they used. But yeah, there's a decent amount of waiting out front. But then go ahead, and then you didn't actually like the expo that much. I don't know if the waiting influenced your decision at all, but you said that inside, it wasn't your favorite.
Yeah, so ideally, I feel like an expo should be a huge hall with kind of a gridlock of vendors, and for the runner, to walk in, collect their bib, and then just kind of zigzag through the lines and try out different things in the booth. Here, you had the bib pickup in the beginning, and then the building wasn't a hall. It was just a regular office building. So you kind of went down a hallway, and then you went downstairs to collect your shirt, and then you went from the back to the front to walk by a few booths to can't say that word, to then collect whatever you wanted. I also didn't really feel like there was any gear that was interesting to me.
I don't remember having a lot of stuff for sale.
Yeah, and the expo was also pretty far south. We Ubered. If you would have taken public transportation, it probably would have taken you 45 minutes to go there from Trastevere, where we were staying, which is southwest of the Coliseum, probably 10-15 minute walk. So it was kind of far, and I really don't remember getting there because I fell asleep in the Uber twice. So tired. But yeah, so then, the only thing that we picked up at the expo was they gave us a backpack, which was cute, rather than giving us a disposable plastic bag. They had made these backpacks for the runners where you could just have a sticker and put your bib number on it. So you knew, this would be your check bag. The other thing that I picked up besides that was just samples of dog food, which I don't know. I don't know why they had that at the expo. I couldn't really read it, but we had the kids with us and they were excited for that. And they said that was going to be the souvenir for the dog. So that was that.
Yeah.
And then after the expo, we were deciding to either enjoy their pasta meal, which was on site.
So the pasta meal was basically someone standing at the bottom of a staircase saying you have to pay before you get in, but they wouldn't really describe what the meal was or anything else. And there weren't a lot of people going up there. Plus, we're in Rome, Italy. I figured we could probably find pasta a lot of different places and it'd probably be better. So we did have a little conflicting, opinion about what to do.
Yeah, it was because yours truly was a little bit hangry. I hadn't had any food since the plane ride and I was tired. So I was like, just feed me now. But then Ryan, who lives off photosynthesis, decided, let's not do that. And so give us a comment on whether or not you would go to the pasta dinner or you would go to get pasta in Rome somewhere else where you could actually see what you're getting first. Yeah, that was kind of a little bit weird. So yeah, so anyway, so we headed back to Trastevere and unloaded all our stuff in our hotel room. At that time, it was already kind of late. because we'd gotten in so late, and we decided to just do separate dinners instead of trying to re-meet with my brother and then his friend and all that stuff. We just kind of headed down, and guess what? There was pasta everywhere.
It was good.
Yeah, so you headed to I don't remember the name of the place. Do you remember what you had?
I did. I had a pasta that would had like what did it have in it? Mushrooms or some other things in it, and then you had a pasta that was like cheesy pasta, like a fettuccine almost.
Oh,
but
yeah,
it wasn't
yeah.
fettuccine. I don't know. We'd have to. It's hard because it's like it's in a different language too, so we couldn't read it all. But
it was just pasta, and the reason we didn't have pizza was because I knew I was going to have pizza every day for the next week.
we actually got a pizza there too for the kids.
Oh, did we?
But yeah.
I don't remember that. But yeah, so then we ate that, and then what did we do? We stopped for a gelato.
We did.
So then it was time to head back to the hotel.
So we tried to get an early rest so that we could be ready for the marathon. And fortunately, we hadn't slept much the night before, fortunately or unfortunately, in the airplane. So it was pretty easy to get to sleep.
Yeah, and the fun part about the place we were staying was that it was on the third floor, which I wasn't worried about, but I was worried about it because I really wanted my brother to go see it, and knowing that it was his first marathon run, I figured if he didn't see it by then, he wouldn't see it for the rest of the trip, because there was no way he was going to run up or walk up 3 flights of stairs, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so he didn't see the room, and he never saw the room.
But, so then, race morning. We wake up. I felt super rested. The entire time in Italy, I actually felt like I slept so much better than I ever do at home. We got the kids dressed and headed over to my brother's hotel, where we dropped off the kids, as my sister-in-law, Anna, shout out to her, was watching them with her daughter, baby Beatrix. And the kids were excited because...
So the kids had their little cousin, and they got to hang out during the race. And we all went with Letty, her brother, and one of her brother's friends,
Manny.
And we walked to the starting line.
Yeah. And so to give you a little oversight of where this would take place, because Rome is such a beautiful city, the race starts at Fori Imperiali, and it ends at the Colosseum, which they're both really close together. Some of the points that you'll pass is Arco di Constantino, Circo Massimo, Porta San Paolo, Pyramid of Cestius, Basilica St. Paul, St. Peter's Basilica, Foro Italico, Piazza Augusto Imperatore, and the Spanish Steps, the Capitoline Hill Steps, the Theater of Marcellus, the Mouth of Truth, and just so many more. And obviously, if you don't know, it goes by St. Peter's Basilica, like I said, which is, it goes through the Vatican, which we'll get into.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. I remember that. But yeah, so we went there. It actually was predicted to be a little colder than it was. It turned out to be, and fortunately, because I don't really like being cold, it was a little bit warmer, and it was actually sunny for most of the race, which was kind of nice. So we got there and we had our throwaway clothes that you had, and jackets and other stuff in our bags. But we really, you really only needed it for the walk there, and you probably didn't even need much otherwise. Yeah,
it was almost like Ryan could check his throwaway jacket, which I prohibited from happening because it was an Under Armour bright blue throwaway jacket that needed to go.
Letty wanted to go. Yeah, she got it for me before at at Goodwill or something. I don't remember.
At Goodwill specifically for this race.
Yeah.
So we weren't going to take it home.
So it's kind of funny because it was like for lacrosse or something, and it had a picture of like a bear on it. So I have no idea where it was from because it just said it had lacrosse sticks and like a bear on it. So whatever icon, it's probably some high school team or something. But
yeah.
Anyway, the start was actually really like kind of chaotic, and it's like too many people for the space that they had, because they had all these trucks laid out. You had to go. That part was organized, I think, in the sense that like you had to have your bag and you can put it in whatever truck matched your numbers, and so that was kind of nice. But there just wasn't a lot of space, so people were like, just trying to get through to get to their stuff and drop it off, and then even between the trucks and the start line, it was just packed full of people. So there's still people from the start line backed up through the trucks where you're dropping your stuff off. And so before the start, everyone kind of just stood in one big pile, and it wasn't really divided much. I mean, maybe maybe it was better somewhere else, but it wasn't really divided much by times or anything. They had certain people had different categories or so. Like you were category A, and the people without like fast times were D or something like that. But
yeah, you were organized by time. So I was corral A. We were all going to run together anyway, but we never made it to the corrals. We literally got stopped in the tracks.
There was no way to get
between
through
the bathrooms.
Yeah,
and we also saw the pacers also getting stuck. We saw balloons ranging from 3 hours and something to 5 hours, all next to each other.
All different paces. Yeah.
Even though the race had already started. So, but it didn't matter to us anyway. It's going to be Steven's, my brother's first marathon. So we just kind of went with it and eventually crossed the starting line.
Yeah. So we were, expectations beforehand. We were planning on just going slow. I mean, Steven was training for the marathon, but then he had gotten sick. So then he didn't get to train like he wanted to. And this is kind of his first intro into running in general, even too.
Like we said, we were just going to plan on running together. So that worked out perfectly well. At the start, there was, I almost said graffiti, but I mean...
Confetti.
Confetti. So yeah, so that was beautiful. And obviously, you see the morning sunrise and you have the Coliseum. The air is perfect and you're running. I mean, I was literally in heaven. I felt like I died and I was in heaven. It was so gorgeous.
Yeah, so we started off right by the Coliseum. I mean, it's hard to miss. A lot of the other stuff I think was some of the other places in that part of Rome. I think they had barriers up, so it was like you weren't able to look at it that much at the beginning. Plus, there's just so much going on with people and stuff. But then as soon as we started, it did get better. It was like, it thinned out relatively quickly, I guess.
It did, yeah.
At least enough so you could run comfortably. You weren't like bumping into people the whole time.
Yeah. I had a fall within the first quarter mile.
Well, we were running and, typical marathons at the beginning when there is still a lot of people, people start spreading out to the sidewalks and stuff like that. So we were actually running on one of the sidewalks, but then the sidewalk stopped and it wasn't like a gradual, it was just like a little curb. And Letty was looking around somewhere else, videotaping, not looking where she was running, and she missed the fact that we were going off a curb.
I literally rolled my ankle off it, but saving factor was that it was a step down, so I had enough time. Usually fall on my face, but enough time for my arms to come out and like catch me right before that would happen.
It wasn't a bad fall.
It was the good ankle, so it was a good thing. So with that, I felt awake and fresh, and we started this marathon.
Do you have any memorable experiences from the first half?
I remember the Italians being very friendly and cheerful. I remember there being a lot of Mario Brothers.
I don't remember seeing a lot of Mario Brothers. There was one very memorable Mario, though.
Oh, yes. So there was a bunch of runners pushing wheelchairs, and this guy didn't have anyone in his wheelchair. So instead he had placed a boombox on there and he was playing, European music, which I just remember videotaping my brother because my brother knew that song, and it gave him, when you hear a song and it's just your vibe. And I think that was probably his fastest mile. He was just like recording himself with Mario, running to it, and he just felt so happy, and that made my heart so happy.
But anyway, that was in the first half, I think, right? That we saw him, but
it's pretty early on.
But yeah, it was a little ways away, but
yeah, and other things that we saw were a lot of people cheering. There was people dressed up like gladiators on the sides, and I just remember seeing the sights and being in awe of, Rome is such an old city. It's just really cool to see that on foot. Just imagine people close the road for you and you're sightseeing on foot. So that was really, really cool. At kilometer 13, 14, we got to see our kids, and my brother got to see his wife and his daughter. And that was really emotional for me because I run a lot of races and I never get to run with family, or you run with family in the combination and also seeing my kids. So that was cool. My son gave me a big hug. My daughter gave me a little hug and she gave me that look and she was like, Mom, why are you stopping? You need to keep running. And I said, Liana, the time doesn't matter. We're running this for fun. And she kind of rolled her eyes and she was like, you need to get going again, which was kind of interesting.
She was worried about you because a lot of people had gone by before you.
Oh. She always does.
No, and it was cool to see. It was cool to see them all excited and cheering on. I think they, took the energy of the crowd around them and Letty's energy, as she always is, and we're high-fiving people according to their aunt. They were high-fiving and people were running across the race course to give them high fives. Before we got there, and so that was kind of cool. Yeah,
that was definitely cool. And Liana also told me that this was the best day of the whole trip for her. So it was kind of cool to hear, getting inspired by running. I don't really ever try to push our kids into running, but, maybe we do just submissively. No, subconsciously.
Subliminally.
We're sending subliminal messages. Anyhow, so after that, let's see. My brother, well, we'll have him on, so he'll tell you about his own race. Any other things that you remember seeing during the race that really inspired you or that really stuck with you?
I do remember the cobblestones a lot. It wasn't maybe as bad as I thought running on them, but there were some areas where you were better off choosing a path as opposed to just running, anywhere you wanted to. But it wasn't as bad as I thought it might have been.
I think the cobblestones, like they said, there was about 6 kilometers of cobblestones. I feel like they didn't matter to us as much because of our pace. We were going slow and easy. But I think when you're racing and you're exhausted and you're just trying to have a certain footstep constantly, I think that would have bothered me a lot. I definitely wouldn't try to race on that. Also, some of them are worn down a little bit and they're a little bit more slippery. So if you're racing, that's something definitely to consider.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a little bit more energy to run over cobblestones, and when you're running in a marathon and if you're running at your limit, then that could make a difference. Not even just like you say, making sure you don't fall, but also, there's even rivets or, ruts in the road or so, which can mean you're like stepping up or down over things. And, it's not a big deal over a little bit, but when you're running a long time and again at your limit, it makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do remember the back half I was walking on, we were running on a paved road, and I was thinking, wow, this is really flat and paved. And so that kind of, I guess, gives you an idea of a lot of the race wasn't super flat and even.
Yeah, that you noticed it like that. So during the marathon, we met a lot of cool people.
Yeah, during the race, you saw some gladiators that wanted to take their picture with you while you were running, which is kind of random, but...
So I stopped and let them take the picture, and they wrapped an Italian flag around me.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do with that picture.
And I actually, so at the second half of the marathon, I don't know if we're getting to that yet, but someone said, oh, Marathon Running Podcast, because I happen to be wearing the Marathon Running Podcast shirt. And they're like, I know that podcast. And I was like, oh, wow, I can't believe somebody recognized the podcast while we're running there. But that was really cool. Yeah, I was like, wow, that's really neat.
Yeah, we're getting out there a little bit more, so that's good. Also, I remember that I saw, the typical thing that you would think about Italy. I saw like a man that was wearing kind of clothing, congregational clothing. I saw some nuns that were waving and cheering people on. A lot of kids.
So to me, I thought the crowds were very spread out, which was kind of neat. Like, most of the race course, you had people there cheering. I mean, maybe near the end there was less, but we were running slow, so a lot of people probably left. But it wasn't like super concentrated in one area, but yet it was all over the place, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, that was cool. That was definitely cool. Do you remember when it comes to food and stuff they were offering on the course? What is your recollection of that?
Yeah, they had a bunch of stations where they had water and then like a sports type drink. I don't know what it was called. And then they had some fruit. They didn't have the fruit and actually crackers and stuff until, I think it wasn't even until past halfway. So it was in the latter half of the race. And actually in the latter half of the race, and I don't know, maybe it was just because we were running slower, but they had like run out of cups in some of the places. So they were like, just had hoses that people were drinking out of and things like that. One thing that was impactful to me was that they had sponges in water to like wipe off your face, and that was really cool, or to wipe off whatever, like the sweat and everything else. And I actually really like that. Although I did see that it made for a lot of trash and cool pictures of sponges like parting the road. But I liked it because it was nice to get kind of that sweat off or the saltiness off you and feel fresher.
Yeah, I remember that now. I don't really recall much of the food either. I remember that we were on our legs a long time and enough to eventually feel a little bit of hunger. I did like the idea of the sponges. I just wasn't warm enough to use a cold sponge on my body. I felt like, running in a sports bra was enough, and anything else was going to make me kind of get too cold. I also don't like the pollution part of that
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they clean it up, but the food wise, they had, bananas, they had some oranges, which we never actually got to, apples. They had, like a kind of a cracker that was mildly sweet cracker. And then there's like one station, I think, that had some additional stuff there. But it was funny because, by the time we got to the food stations, all oranges were gone. Initially you had bananas and other stuff, but then further along, the bananas were no longer being cut. And you just like have full bananas, and then they were really green bananas and full apples. I think I'm sure over time they kind of got lazy and didn't want to, keep cutting and like preparing stuff. So the further along we got, like the less prepared it seemed to.
But the more food you would get, and then eventually, same with the sports drink. You would have a full bottle, and then you and I were kind of feeling bad, like we're like, you want to share this because I don't want to just take a sip of this massive half-gallon bottle and then just toss it. So then I found myself running with this big jug of liquid. And eventually I would just, drop it somewhere. But yeah.
Well, the guy actually like poured it into a smaller bottle for us. And then we shared it. And so, and that worked out better.
Yeah. So another thing that happened during the run was my brother, when he was getting into the kind of negative headspace, was saying to us, oh, I should be running with someone else. I should be running with this guy. And he was pointing at a gentleman that was running in front of us and sometimes behind us, kind of always the same pace. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to check out this guy. I ran past him because everybody's bib had their name and a flag next to it. So I ran past him and kind of peeked at his flag, and I couldn't recognize his country's flag. Yeah, it was kind of creepy that I did that. And so then in order to avoid the creepiness, I introduced myself. I said, hi, I'm Letty. I just wanted to see what country you're from. And he said he was from Tanzania. His name was Patrick, and it was his first marathon as well. So I told Patrick, my brother Steven is running your pace. Would you like to run with us a little bit? And he was very excited because he was on his own running that pace and kind of struggling. So for the rest of the marathon, and I want to say it was probably more than half, we ran with Patrick. So our crew of 4 turned into a crew of 5. And now, I know we've been dragging this on forever, but eventually we all crossed the finish line as a human chain. I was holding Ryan's hand, who was holding Manny's hand, who was holding Steven's hand, who was holding Patrick's hand. That video can be seen on Instagram, and it's super beautiful. It makes me emotional. It was so cool. How you like run this marathon in this big city and then you cross the finish line together.
Well, Patrick also was signed up for another marathon within the month, right? Or a month later?
Yeah, Steven kept in touch with him and he's still doing it. I think it's Madrid.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's right. It was Madrid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And in his home country, there is a marathon too, right?
Yes, it is.
And so we might actually do that at some point because that sounded really cool.
Yeah. So, Ryan, any last words? Would you run Rome again?
Yeah, I think so. I actually really enjoyed it, like at a slower pace too. Especially at the latter half, we got to stop and look at stuff. And so that was kind of neat.
Yeah. We might be back there next year again. So thank you. If you guys are still here listening, we really appreciate your support. Let us know if there's anything that you want us to talk about in the upcoming episodes. We're always willing and able to find experts on whatever it is that interests you for marathon training.
And if you see us on the race course, yell at us and say hi, because I love it.
Yes. And we would love to take a picture with you. Well, me.
Yeah.
You too?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't mind, but you'd probably rather have a picture with her.
Oh, okay. Anyway, until next week.
Have a good week of running.